So, what did running back Mike Garrett accomplish before anyone else? Before answering that, I want to provide some essential background. He was a small running back at only 5'9", 190 pounds, but he was extremely elusive. At USC, he won the 1965 Heisman Trophy when he led the nation in rushing with 1,440 yards, the fourth highest total at that time. In 1966, he was drafted by the Rams as the 18th overall selection in the NFL draft, and he was drafted by the Chiefs in the 20th round of the AFL draft. Why so late? There was a rumor that Garrett had already somehow signed with the Raiders. How could this rumor have any legs? I don't know. But it was 57 years ago, and a lot of wacky things used to happen, especially concerning the Raiders. When the Chiefs determined that he was actually available, they signed him to a $500,000 contract. Why so much? Well, in 1965, he was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates in the 41st round, but then interest peaked when he was drafted by the deep pocket Dodgers in 1966. This wouldn't be the only time that he was drafted by a Major League Baseball team, but more on that later. Garrett got out of the gate with great success. He was second in the AFL Rookie of the Year voting and made the Pro Bowl while leading the league with a dazzling 5.4 yards per carry. He rushed for 801 yards, tied for second best. In 1967, he had his best year by rushing for 1,087 yards, third best in the league, and he had the fourth most yards from scrimmage, and he again made the Pro Bowl and was named first-team All-Pro. He had his bumps in the road like most running backs, and fans voiced their displeasure. But in 1969, all was okay in KC. This was the season in which they won the Super Bowl over the Vikings, and it was the second AFL championship team that Garrett played on. He scored a touchdown on the play 65 toss power trap. Garrett is quoted as saying, "We ran it only once or twice the whole season." It's a fake toss to the left with a handoff to Garrett to the right, thereby attempting to fake the middle linebacker Lonnie Warwick. Garrett wore number 21 with Kansas City, but wore number 25 for San Diego in 1970, starting in Week 4 after he was traded. In 1971 through 1973, he wore number 20 for the Chargers. Garrett was traded to San Diego for the Chiefs' second-round selection in the 1971 draft, who would be Big Wilbur Young, who played in 153 games over his 7-year career with Kansas City and 4.5 years with San Diego. After the trade, Garrett threatened to quit and play baseball as he was drafted a third time, again by the Dodgers, in 1970. He capitulated and played with the Chargers. 26-year-olds who haven't played professional baseball yet rarely make it. Garrett had worn out his welcome in KC. In 3 games started for them in 1970, he only rushed 21 times for 62 yards with 4 catches for only 4 yards. After 4 full years of being the main man at running back, it looked like his small-framed body was worn out. Thus, the Chiefs intended to replace him with 1969 second-round draft choice Ed Podolak. In Garrett's first game against the Chiefs, he only rushed twice for 4 yards, but in the last game of the season against them, it was a different story. 125 total yards, 2 second-half touchdowns, and a 31-13 victory. In Game 1 of the 1971 season, the Chargers beat the Chiefs again, this time 21-14, with Garrett tallying 77 total yards and a touchdown. After Week 10, 1972, he had played 5 games versus his old team and scored 7 touchdowns. He kept all 7 footballs, painted them red and white, then labeled them. After only rushing for 208 yards in 1970, Garrett bounced back to rush for a respectable 591 yards. He chipped in with 41 receptions, which was just outside of the top 10 in the entire NFL. Even though Garrett had a miserable Week 14 against the Steelers, he had a terrific 1972 season by rushing for 1,031 yards. He became the first AFL/NFL running back to rush for 1,000 plus yards in a single season for 2 different teams. Cookie Gilchrist turned the trick in the Canadian Football League and the American Football League. He was a huge running back who was the AFL Player of the Year in 1962, his first year in the league, when he led it in rushing yards with 1,096 and rushing touchdowns with 13. He led the AFL in rushing touchdowns each of his first 4 years in the league. Unfortunately, his statistics and background don't get nearly, if any, publicity anymore. In 1973, Mike Garrett rushed for the second lowest mark of his career. One aspect of his play that doesn't get enough credit, however, is his pass receiving skills. He was 8th in the AFL for most receptions in both 1967 and 1969. When John Unitas looped this pass over number 66 Bill Berge, the 30-yard gain placed Unitas over the once unthinkable 40,000 passing yard mark. Appropriately, the ball was sent to the Hall of Fame. (1973) was Garrett's last season, which included some highlights that were equally matched with lowlights. His career rushing yard mark of 5,481 doesn't seem like much today, but at his retirement it was the 14th best all time. He chipped in with 2,010 receiving yards, and ProFootballReference.com has him rated as the 79th best running back all time. The last game of his career was played, appropriately, in Kansas City. In depressing 8-degree wind chill weather, over 35,000 fans failed to show up to see the Chiefs beat the Chargers 33-6, with Garrett only rushing for 25 yards. The opening game of the 1970 season was a rematch of Super Bowl IV. The game took place in Minnesota, and Mike Garrett didn't fare so well. 7 rushes, 16 yards, and this costly fumble. The Vikings revenged their prior loss in dominating fashion. Here are 2 Heisman Trophy winners from USC, Garrett in 1965 and O.J. Simpson in 1968. In 1979, Charles White would join them along with Marcus Allen in 1981 and Reggie Bush in 2005. Bush's trophy would later be vacated.